A Boeing 747 can reach speeds of more than 600 miles per hour. Given that the Earth's perimeter measures almost 25,000 miles, this airplane would take less than 2 days to complete a round-the-world flight. According to our estimates, the same trip by car will take us a little over 2 years. Episode 1. The Last European Aborigines. This is Seville. In the middle of August. It's hot. I'd say the heat is unbearable. But we are breaking out into cold sweats. We're nervous because, in just a few hours, we are about to embark upon the greatest adventure of our lives. It's taken us 4 years to prepare this trip, and now it's hard to believe we are finally about to drive off in the car. The day we started drawing lines on a map of the world, I think we got carried away. First, we mapped out routes, then we checked to see if they were viable. Let's see. From Spain, we could travel all the way through Europe to Scandinavia. And if we keep going, we could even reach the North Cape. A more ambitious plan is to start in St. Petersburg. From there, we would drive down Russian roads and eventually get to the deserts of Mongolia, where the nomads live. And why not keep going? In one final spurt, we could reach the last inhabited areas of Kamchatka. Then again, there's also the Pan-American route. From Alaska, we could set off on a trip down the Canadian coast and venture inland through the United States. Then we'd have to cut across Mexico and the countries on the Caribbean. After that, we'd cross the Amazon forest and then follow the Inca Trail. And finish off by traveling all the way down Patagonia. And who knows, Antarctica isn't all that far from there. Nor could we forget the route that runs between Cape Town and Cairo. That would mean traveling all through Africa, visiting the world's least explored areas and the tribes on the continent's mainland. Later, we'd follow the wake of the people of the Nile and then just drive around the Mediterranean before returning to Spain. We debated for days, and since we couldn't agree on which of the routes to choose, in the end, we decided to do them all. These are my traveling companions. They're paying close attention to everything the doctor says not to eat.
Ensalada, ensaladilla, pasteles con crema, cubitos de hielo. Eso en pueblecito, olvidado. Vaya a venir así. ¿Vale? Eso hay que hacer.
And this is José Luis, our photographer and producer. Undoubtedly, he's also the team handyman. He'll be in charge of everything to do with car mechanics, travel logistics, and handling the budget. At least, as long as we have some sort of budget left to handle.
Vamos.
And aside from that, he'll somehow find the time to act as our guide on some of the visits.
En el S-56 sentimos la claustrofobia de navegar en un submarino de la Segunda Guerra Mundial. Este es el sistema de esclusas del Canal de Panamá. La naturaleza de Kamchatka ofrece un montón de posibilidades.
José Luis is also a professor of art history and a pianist. But what really distinguishes him is that he's apt to travel through Canada wearing shell cordovan leather shoes and tour Kamchatka dressed in summer trousers. He's the sort of man who never messes up his hair, a man with poise who keeps his cool. He's deeply grateful.
Qué gustazo.
And he's definitely the most diplomatic of the three. He always has a kind gesture and never loses his composure. Well, almost never.
Otra vez, venid con nosotros, me cago. Nada, papá, corta. Espérate, para un momento eso, tío. Hola, me cago. La mierda, tío. La mierda.
He doesn't know it yet, of course, but during the trip he'll have to shore up bridges, act as a doctor, ride mules through forests, test volcano lava, ride camels, kiss dolphins, and photograph all sorts of landscapes, situations, and faces. A lot will happen in the next 2 years. It's best not to give it away before we leave. For the moment, we're in Seville, and we're going to try to relax a bit here. Some calm their nerves by taking a walk around the block, before taking a trip around the world. This is Dan. He'll be the group's director. He'll lead us with a firm step. Well, more or less. He'll be the public face of the expedition, and you could say he has a rare ability to blend in with the locals.
¡Alegría!
Wow, it's good. Sí, very good.
Dame un abrazo.
No.
Hello. Hello.
In addition, we'll also see him in situations that are somewhat more thrilling.
¿Has visto eso?
No hay que correr, sobre todo no hay que correr.
When it comes to his dress sense, Dan is just the opposite of José Luis. And sometimes his hairstyle isn't entirely conventional. Changes he's made in 2 years are sometimes disconcerting. But I have to admit, he's very enthusiastic and he's always willing to take on a challenge.
I want to be to you high. You high, right?
Plus a second camera unit, a support team, an alternative mobile unit. That's him. And just between you and me, whenever he's excited or nervous,
Esto no es fácil, amigo.
he can't help expressing it more or less like this.
Wow.
As I was saying, this is our director.
Quieres llevarlo todo grabadito, ¿no?
¿Así?
But let's get back to the present. When you set off to travel around the world, don't give too much thought to the vaccines you need.
La meningitis,
You'll have to get them all.
¿Y esta es?
la fiebre amarilla.
This guy who's afraid to look at the needle? That's me. My name's Alfonso, and I'll spend most of my time behind the camera. I'm the person who'll be telling you this whole story. In a sense, I am the eyes of this expedition. Or to put it a bit less poetically, the one who actually works. I'll start work while others are still sleeping. I'll have to take my camera out on the most remote islands in Alaska, in Venezuela's Grand Savannah, in the Gobi Desert, or in the caves of Norway. Although we will all help set up our recording equipment in incredible places, like next to Victoria Falls and right on the very edge of the Grand Canyon. And in my own way, I'll also get to share some special treats along the way, whenever my travel companions are feeling especially generous.
A ver, Alfonso. A ver si está rico. Alfonso, mira, que hoy te estamos dando mucho de comer.
¿Qué te parece? Mira, tengo a mi cámara que está muerto de hambre.
You would think I was their pet.
Rico, ¿eh? Rico.
But when push comes to shove, we'll have to work together as a team. That's the only way to survive on the road. We'll be traveling for a long time. We'll be sharing the same car. All sorts of accommodation. Hours of work. Some great moments. And also a few misfortunes.
Dani!
We'll be sharing difficult situations. Moments of tension and unforgettable experiences. This is a long-distance race, and we'll have to be prepared to take over at a moment's notice. On a 2-year trip, you won't get very far unless you learn to respect your companions. There's no better gift for a camera operator than recording the world's landscapes. I'll have a multicolored mosaic before me, with every possible shade and tone. But more than anything, A World Apart intends to approach people. For over 24 months, we'll travel around the planet in search of societies living on the fringe. We'll show their cultures and sacred rituals. But we'll also look at another aspect of these communities, that of progress and tourism. The world has been flooded with satellite dishes and mobile phones. This is an irrefutable fact, and all we want to do is to tell these people truths. But there's a lot to be learned from the 21st century's indigenous peoples. We have over 60,000 miles ahead of us. We'll be on the road for 2 years. And the journey is about to begin. Before we've even left, we're already faced with 2 problems. The first is, what on earth should we pack? And the second, how on earth do we fit everything in the car? Space is of vital importance if you're sharing a car for months on end. All right, first we have to take spare parts for the car. Then there's the sound equipment, the still cameras, the second unit video camera, the tape player, more camera equipment, boxes full of videotape, and then, of course, we each have our own personal luggage, just the bare essentials, something to make a toast with, the tripod, and, oh yeah, the camera. The first few steps are difficult. Goodbyes, doubts, and giddiness. But we leave all that behind once we cross our first border. In the first few days, we drive through the vineyards of Bordeaux and the dunes of the French coast. It takes us just a few minutes to climb the dune of Paila, the tallest in Europe. And it takes even less time to come down. Almost without realizing it, we arrive in a city with a skyline that looks oddly familiar. But driving across Paris requires a good dose of patience.
Bienvenidos al Arco del Triunfo. Estamos en París, la ciudad más glamurosa del mundo, con sus glamurosos atascos.
Paris is like an open-air museum. In places such as Montmartre, the streets are suffused with glamour, and there's an artist on every corner. In other squares, such as Vendôme, glamour comes in the shape of a diamond. And in some cases, glamour moves at 180 miles an hour. In any event, in this city, it's a good idea to bring an umbrella if you want to enjoy one of Europe's most artistic capitals. But we're looking for the last remaining indigenous tribes on the continent. And it's obvious we're not going to find them here. We're already in Belgian territory, and when we get to Ghent, we discover a monumental city. Churches in Europe tend to be repetitive, and when we enter one, we get the feeling that the old continent is all the same. Though perhaps Europe's real personality is to be found in its squares. The squares invite a stroll, although there are many ways to get around the streets of Ghent. The city has preserved the charm of old trolleys, streetcars, bicycles, and of course the horse and buggy, which makes the tourists feel like time has stood still, while Ghent citizens wonder why the traffic is standing still. But if we keep driving, just 25 miles away, we find another city that has a personality all its own, including bell towers and a medieval wall. But it's a good idea to park the car before visiting Bruges. There are some places where it's a good idea to carry a guidebook. Not in Bruges. Here it's better simply to get on a boat and wander around the labyrinth of canals at your leisure. At night, Bruges still retains that dreamlike quality, romantic and poetic atmosphere. All right, come on. That's quite enough of poetry for this expedition. There's another city where the nightlife is also fairly surreal. Only for somewhat different reasons.
Esta es sin duda en bicicleta la mejor manera de recorrer la capital holandesa. Una ciudad con más de 400 puentes que la convierten en un laberinto para perderse por el día y para perderse por la noche.
Over 600,000 bicycles travel around the streets of Amsterdam. This is no doubt the best way to get over the hundreds of bridges that crisscross the city. The Dutch capital has become a point of reference for a whole bunch of things. Many see it as a model of tolerance and plurality. After just a short stroll, we realize we're in a place that is truly universal. Everyone here eventually feels like they fit in. There are dance and music performances around every corner. Along the banks of the single canal lies the flower market, where you'll find all sorts of plants. There are more than 20 floating stalls, each of which sells some sort of exotic seed and, of course, tulips, one of Holland's symbols. But after nightfall, the city's inhabitants prefer a different type of plant. We are in the red light district, an area that's full of so-called coffee shops. Here, the city of freedom has become the city of sin. But it's a legal sin. Amsterdam's nightlife is perfect for young people who want to party. We'll spend just a few hours here, and it's probably just as well that we move on. We've only just left home, but already we've travelled across 5 countries. So far, the trip has taken us from square to square. European countries have a fairly homogeneous culture, with churches in the daytime, parties during the night, and highways without borders. We'll slow down once we get through Germany. Denmark is our gateway to the Nordic countries. And here, things move at the calm pace befitting a society that has solved most of its problems. Elsinore looks like a city about to be inaugurated. The streets are neat and clean, and the boats docked at the port sparkle as if they were new. But actually, this age-old city inspired Shakespeare almost 400 years ago. Kronborg Castle was the setting for the famous scribe's tragedy, Hamlet. And today the Danes can look out at its outline or enjoy the views from the Øresund Strait, which separates Sweden from Denmark. 2 neighbours that share similar social welfare cultures. There is very little unemployment and the per capita income is among the highest in the world, over $62,000. But at around 6 in the afternoon, the shops in most cities close and the streets are practically deserted. People here live behind closed doors. Outside there is no noise, not a trace of the hubbub of southern European cities. Perhaps all the activity is concentrated in the capital. Weather permitting, just by visiting the port, you'll realize that Copenhagen isn't a bad place to live.
Cheers!
Beer has become a part of Danish culture, and it's even more enjoyable by this mural of colourful facades. This is one of the most pleasant spots in the city. But it doesn't take us long to realise that sunshine is a scarce commodity here. Even if the weather suddenly changes, people still use their bicycles to get around, every time of year. And they'll brave all sorts of weather in order to enjoy one of the world's oldest amusement parks. Tivoli Gardens is a park that's not at all typical. It's right inside the city and welcomes some 4 million visitors a year. In 1843, Tivoli's founder won support from the King of Denmark by arguing that when people enjoy themselves, they don't think about politics. In a way, that's how this society evolved. Distracted by such oddities as the Guinness World Record Museum, where you can measure yourself up against the tallest man in history, and fascinated by the Glyptotek's art collection. Here you can travel back to the time of the Etruscans, explore the crypts of the Egyptian pharaohs, and enjoy one of the best collections of Greek statues anywhere in the world. Perhaps the greatest paradox is that although the city houses great works of art such as The Thinker, the one image that has come to represent it is this one. Many tourists are convinced that if they don't see The Little Mermaid, they haven't really been to Copenhagen. But even in one of the most modern cities in Europe, there's a place where people prefer to live as if they were still in the 1970s. The neighbourhood known as Christiania was founded in 1971 as a social experiment inspired by hippie culture and the squatters movement. Ever since, there's been a certain tolerance for Christiania's anarchy. And they even have a special, more permissive set of laws. However, nowadays, you rarely hear John Lennon's Imagine, the song that inspired Christiania's first inhabitants. It seems even chaos is organised into its own distinct neighbourhoods. And that's our impression of Denmark. In order to reach Sweden, we'll have to drive across the 10-mile-long Øresund Bridge. The bridge connects Copenhagen in Denmark with the city of Malmö in Sweden. Our final destination is much further north. But for the time being in southern Sweden, we again enjoy the calm of the Nordic countries. Such silence. The following morning, we visit Malmö's historic district. It's full of old-world charm, yet there's nothing old about it. They really pay attention to detail here, and the streets are impeccable.
Bueno, no sé qué está haciendo. Excuse me.
Yep.
Yes, what are you doing? You are taking off all the plants?
Yeah, burning the weed.
Why? Because this is the cleanest city in the world.
Yeah, but we want it to be really, really, really clean.
As we've seen in Denmark, they like to play opposites up against each other here. Near the port, they've built one of the most avant-garde neighbourhoods in Sweden. A prestigious architect designed each house, and each tenant, no doubt, has a hefty bank account. The turning Torso Tower stands out among the houses in this millionaire district. It stands 623 feet tall, and it's one of the most famous buildings in Sweden. It takes about 40 seconds to reach the 51st floor. And when you enter one of the homes, it really looks more like an aeroplane.
Bienvenidos al piso 51 de la torre más alta de apartamentos de toda Europa. Estamos en la torre de torsión y esto es Malmö.
Designer buildings, orderly streets, and a consumer mentality. The credit card is sometimes seen as a distinguishing trait of the Nordic countries. We are looking forward to getting away from urban areas and starting the real trip through Scandinavia's countryside. As we enter Norwegian territory, we are excited to continue moving north in search of the Sami, the last remaining Aborigines in Europe. In Norway, there are less than 6 inhabitants per square mile, and most of them live in the cities. So we'll have to drive for hours through regions that are practically deserted. Just over 600 miles from Malmö, we finally reach the city of Trondheim. You could say it's a typical Nordic city, except that this is where you find the Nidaros Cathedral, which many consider the most important church in Scandinavia. In the Middle Ages, this church held the mortal remains of Saint Olaf, Norway's patron saint. Having noted this historic fact, let's get back on the road. As we move further north, the distance between one city and the next grows, and we begin to feel more and more isolated. Before we even realize it, we have just about reached the Arctic Circle. It's hard to believe we've already driven 3,700 miles from Seville. The cheapest way to travel around Norway is to cook your own food. We're not the only ones to have reached that same conclusion, so we'll share our salmon with other travelers.
Hostia, qué pinta tiene eso, macho.
At this point, we're going to take a little detour in order to visit Svartisen National Park. We'll have to cross dirt roads and bodies of water. Tore is a man who's used to walking around these forests that no one else ever visits. This is the southern Sami's ancestral land. And underneath this terrain, we'll discover a different landscape.
I'm following you.
This place is full of legends. According to Norse mythology, this is one of the caves where the terrible trolls used to hide. And this is the well where they locked up their victims. But we don't find anything sinister in these tunnels. In fact, there's something magical about this labyrinth, sculpted by underground rivers.
This could be, no, it's not silver. Actually, it's humidity. When you put the light on the humidity here, it looks like silver. So the cave is kind of an artistic adventure.
Yeah. Y además con el color rosado de la piedra, es realmente una maravilla. Es precioso. Pero si te acercas ves que son gotas de agua, ¿no? Parecen resina. Parecen gotas de resina.
There are few roads here, and we have to lug the cameras and tripod around the park's canyons. We never thought we'd take such a long walk with our equipment, but we don't really mind. We all cooperate every step of the way to carry all our material. And the effort is worth it. I suspect we'll have this same feeling more than once on our trip around the world. Today we're here, shooting the rivers of northern Norway with their glacial waters and looking out at the twisted rocks that decorate their banks. This part of the river is called the Marble Castle, and the place has a soothing effect.
This place and this surrounding is the wildest part of Northern Europe. You're really in the wilderness here. You're in the Svartisen National Park. And on this spot, the Marble Castle, you can feel that you're as close to heaven as it's possible to come on Earth.
We are breathing pure air. valleys with glacial rivers, elk and reindeer in the forests. We've reached the southern part of Lapland, but even though this is the Sami's home, we've yet to meet any Sami. We still have to drive along a few more roads and around Svartisen Park before reaching the vicinity of Mo i Rana. And here, finally, we'll meet the first indigenous people on our trip. Several Sami greet us in one of their traditional tents, dressed in traditional costumes and singing traditional songs. I'd say this is all a bit too authentic to be truly authentic, especially given that this family lives in a huge detached house less than 200 feet away. But maybe progress and culture aren't really at odds.
In the past, the government, they didn't allow Sami to learn their own language. It wasn't allowed to speak language, Sami language.
And do you feel the frontiers like Finland, Norway, Sweden?
Do you feel Norwegian?
I feel like a Norwegian when I'm abroad. Here in Norway, I feel like a Sami.
What we are gonna eat now?
Reindeer meat. We use reindeer meat boiled, grilled, and dried. Take some fat, a spoon, eat reindeer with coffee.
It's okay.
¿Tú te imaginabas por la mañana que ibas a tomar café con carne de reno y grasa de reno?
Es curiosísimo, es una cosa extraña, ¿eh? Vamos a probar a ver qué tal.
It's like cafe latte.
Skåt mot kavalokke, svameljetaeros, gåte med jaksåsle.
The chat and the coffee with reindeer meat have brought us closer to the Samis. Even in Lapland, when you sit around a bonfire, you tend to feel at home. And yet, we are now entering the Arctic Circle. Our plan is to continue moving further north and drive around Norway's fields. This region has always been home to fishermen, although they are lonesome fishermen. We keep stopping time and again to contemplate this communion between the sea and the mountains. But in Lapland, there's always a magical place further up the road. And this time, we're going to change vehicles. From the port of Skudvik, we board the car on a ferry headed for the roads of the Lofoten archipelago. And already on the ferry, we realize we're in a spectacular place. When we reach the city of Svolvær, it's pouring rain. But that won't stop us from exploring one of the roughest and most isolated landscapes on the continent. Several enormous bridges connect the Lofoten Islands, and it's possible to reach every last corner of the archipelago by driving along a 60-mile road that winds its way among the mountains. Every village is a fishing village, and every house looks out on the sea. The fortunate few can even build themselves a little summer cottage by the Arctic beaches, which is no doubt an interesting paradox. The sea breeze has the effect of tempering a climate that should be much colder at these latitudes. And we invariably find a bustle of boats navigating among the fields. For over 1,000 years, this community has depended on cod fishing for its livelihood, just like the Samis in this part of Norway did. The the tour of Lofoten ends in a place called O. Since it's no longer possible to keep going, we'll have to turn round. It's been several days since we entered the Arctic Circle. Since then, we've driven up the coast of Norway all the way to the Lofoten Islands. Well, now we are headed towards inland Lapland. In order to get there, we'll have to cut across Sweden before crossing the Finnish border and reaching the city of Rovaniemi. It's interesting that after crossing the wildest part of Scandinavia, we suddenly find a designer landscape. During the Second World War, the city suffered a devastating fire, and Finnish architect Alvar Aalto designed the new Rovaniemi to look like the horns on a reindeer. He also designed many of its buildings, including the one that houses the public library. Inside, Alvar Aalto also designed each corner and every last detail. In Rovaniemi, it seems to us there's an overall harmony. Its bridges are avant-garde, and its museums have designer galleries. But if there's one neighborhood that's all make-believe, a city within a city, that is no doubt Santa Claus Village. Around mid-September, it's not exactly a bustling place, but it's not missing a thing. For its inhabitants, it's Christmas all year round, and they take this very seriously. Though it may not seem like it, this room full of elves and Santa's helpers is actually the busiest post office in the world.
How many letters do you receive every year?
Well, until December we receive approximately 1.5 million.
1.5 million?
Yes. Well, last Christmas we received approximately 500,000 letters all over the world.
Santa's village is an artificial place and is mostly a great excuse to attract tourists. But there's no use resisting. We may as well surrender to the magic and accept that this line at the Arctic Circle takes us straight to Santa Claus himself.
Hello, Santa.
No, mutta kappas. Hello, hello.
¿Cómo está?
Muy bien, gracias. Bienvenido al Círculo Polar.
I wonder, how can you make all those gifts during the Christmas time?
I have a solution. Time is relative.
But you have a very good job, I think, because we work too hard during Christmas time, but the rest of the year you have holidays.
Oh, actually, that's not right. At first, what I'm doing, it's not a job. It's not a work. It's a life or lifestyle.
And you have to be with the children that come to visit you during the whole year.
This is kind of a meeting place, and every single day throughout the year I meet here guests. Little children, as well as not so little children.
Santa Claus, thank you. See you in Christmas.
Hasta Navidad.
Adiós.
I'm not sure where we'll be spending Christmas this year, but for now, we're going to keep heading north. The only traffic jams on Finland's roads are provoked by these guys. Reindeer are the landscape's true protagonists. We've gotten used to driving around reindeer and boreal forests. To understand the Sami, you must see where they live, because what characterizes indigenous peoples is their relationship with nature. And that leads us to the shores of Lake Inari. Nearby, we will find every animal in the region, all in one place.
Huskies como estos habitan en esta granja más allá del Círculo Polar Ártico. Esta es la fauna típica de esta parte del mundo y os lo vamos a enseñar. ¿Qué tal? Pero bueno, bueno, vale ya.
Huskies are a breed of dog that was designed to withstand cold winters. For centuries, the Sami have used these dogs to get around in the snow. In a few months, we'll be in Alaska. And who knows, maybe there we'll have the chance to ride in one of these sleds. For the moment, this farm's owners will introduce us to each and every one of their guests.
Yes, and the dogs are the best animal for sleds. Why Santa Claus used the reindeer? I don't understand.
I don't know. Okay, and there is Arctic fox.
Arctic fox?
Yes.
Okay, are they dangerous?
No, but you're careful.
Este ejemplar que se ha encaprichado con mi bota es un zorro ártico. La verdad es que yo tengo que mantener un poco las distancias porque no es un animal doméstico, es un animal peligroso. Eso sí, son animales de una belleza extraordinaria y cuando llega el invierno mudan toda esa piel grisácea que tienen ahora para convertirse en unos zorros totalmente blancos.
But it's clear that, of all the animals in Lapland, there's one that really seems to steal the show. And it's an animal we have already encountered.
El reno se ha convertido en todo un símbolo para los habitantes de Laponia y en esta granja, por supuesto, no podía faltar también la incorporación de varios renos. Es un animal que sirve no solamente para el transporte o para abrigarse con sus pieles en invierno, sino como alimento. Es un alimento típico de la gastronomía finlandesa. Yo tengo el privilegio de poder pasear con uno de estos renos, como si fuera un animal doméstico, por los bosques de Finlandia. Así que, con vuestro permiso, me voy a dar una vuelta. Vamos, Ruska, venga, dar una vueltita. ¿Te vienes conmigo? No te pares porque tenemos todavía un camino larguísimo que recorrer.
These forests surround Lake Inari, and many 21st century Samis live on its shores.
Oye, no me des con esos cuernos.
Today we spent the night at the Inari hostel, in the town of Inari, by Lake Inari. No, they're not very original here when it comes to naming things. But in the morning, we discover that this place hosts the most important Sami museum in Scandinavia. The museum does its best to recover a bygone era, a time when the Sami were nomads and had no use for national borders. A time when there were no wire fences for reindeer and Lapland's natives followed the herd wrapped up in furs. The Samis themselves have built this museum, which displays the traditional costumes, handicrafts and leather drums that all serve to tell their history. Part of the museum is outdoors. It's easier to understand this culture in the forest.
It was hard life.
Aili is one of the people who run the Siida Museum, and she herself tells us about the differences among the Samis.
Samis are not one united group, but it consists of smaller groups that make.
There are a lot of difference between them.
Yes. It's usually they only talk about the reindeer Samis, but in Finland reindeer Samis have never been a majority. Actually, in Finland, only about 1/3 of the Samis have been reindeer herders. Before actually the 1850s, the Samis didn't have any log cabins. They had their peat houses. So you have this. Maybe if you take a look at that one.
Yeah.
It was built because the government wanted the Samis to have normal log houses as everybody else, and the government said that they didn't have to pay taxes for 5 years if they built a log cabin like this. And of course, the Samis were ready to start their new life in the cabins.
A new life for the Samis. I wonder what that means. First they abandoned their tents, and then, gradually, they began abandoning their cabins. Now the shops are filled with typical Sami artifacts. Many indigenous people have become entrepreneurs who export part of their culture in the form of stuffed animals, furs and books of old photographs. They no longer defend their traditions in the forests and on the lakes. Nowadays the fight is in the fields of business and politics. This car belongs to Pekka Aikiu. He's the president of the Sami parliament. He did not hesitate to meet with us over coffee, and since he is a president, it's best we let José Luis handle this.
I had to go to school. In my childhood, in my youth, I was not volunteer. I did not want to go to school. But the teachers and my parents, they wanted me to go to school, so I had to go to school. I studied biology, and I used to work at the University of Oulu as a reindeer biologist. I like to be in the forest, even alone. Sometimes I need to go alone to the forest.
Do you feel nationalist? And do you want independence for Sami?
So far, no. So far, no. That has been discussed in many cases that the Sami people have never... Of course, some people always want to be independent in their own countries and on the small islands also. I know many people who have an own island and they want to be emperor on that, but the Sami people have not officially expressed any desire to establish an own country.
And why are the Samis so special?
Sami have a special, very special European culture, we could say so. It's a way, the Sami traditional way in nature is the way to keep these Arctic regions settled by people in a sustainable way. And I think this is the very special feature in Sami.
While we improvise a grill on the shores of Lake Inari, we ponder the Samis. This is a good place to ponder. Perhaps their future lies in their ability to share their territory with reindeers, bears, and other human beings. When evening comes, we head out to ask the locals whether there are any Sami left fishing on the Lake Inari. And without a moment's hesitation, they answer. Joni. Many say he's the last pure Sami left in the region. He's the first to cross the lake when it freezes, and the last to navigate its waters in the fall. And today, Joni is taking us fishing.
Hello, Joni.
Hello.
Hello.
Terve.
My name is Danny. Okay, I heard a lot about you.
He doesn't speak English, so his wife will act as interpreter. From what they've told us, we'll be navigating on the lake to a fairly isolated area, a place Joni visits every once in a while, and where he likes to cast his fishing nets. You can't travel all the way to Lapland only to rush things, so we'll choose a good spot and trade in our watches for a bonfire. Joni has been made tough by many harsh winters, but his laughter is spontaneous. And that sort of combination inspires trust.
How is the life in this society now about the Samis? Are they working like they did before, or they just changed the way of life of the Sami people in the old times?
No, ajat on muuttunut. Ennen kuljettiin suksilla ja poroilla ajettiin, ja nyt ne on koneellistunut, kaikki on moottorikelkat on tullut ja sitten moottorivenneet on tullut ja sitten pitää olla pakettiauto ja henkilöauto talossa, jos meinaa pärjätä, että ne on niin paljon muuttunut, että tänä päivänä pitää olla rahaa, jos meinaa liikkua. Ennen ei tarvinnut yhtään rahaa.
Do you think that the culture, your culture, is losing all the time its sense?
Voi olla, että häviää. Kyllä se koko ajan vähän niin kuin kapenee kuitenkin.
And are you sad about it?
No vähän olen.
But you don't lose your culture because you are here with the nature too.
En menetä, en.
Are you happy?
Olen. Olen.
Joni is the sort of person who is happy to go out on the lake alone. But today he's allowed us to go with him. And that would be me. A few weeks from now the water will start to freeze, and then he'll trade in the boat for a pair of skis and go out to look for reindeer. He's something like a more authentic version of Santa Claus. Up until now, we've only seen the Sami as replicas sold in traditional shops, at stores selling stuffed reindeer dolls, in the political arena, and in trying to preserve their memories in museums. There are fewer than 100,000 Sami spread out over Russia, Sweden, Norway and Finland. They've integrated into society, or diluted their own culture depending on how you look at it. But of all the Sami we've met, Johnny is the only one that gives meaning to the native spirit. The spirit of Lapland's forests. Nevertheless, we want to take one last step and travel further north. We have set out to reach the place where all the highways in Europe end. The most remote regions of Scandinavia are inhabited only by herds of reindeer. Almost no one comes here. That's what makes driving on these roads so exciting. We have to cross the border between Finland and Norway again, and just follow the road. We are approaching a latitude of 71 degrees, 10 minutes and 21 seconds. In other words, the North Cape. This sphere tells us we've reached the northernmost point in mainland Europe. Nothing beyond this point is inhabitable. And soon there won't be any light during the day here. This is a legendary place for many travelers, the end of a long journey. For us, it's also a new starting point. We won't be this far north again on the maps of our trip around the world. Now only the south awaits us, but there's a lot of south below the North Cape.